I wasn't exactly sure how I was going to tackle this one. I have here Homefront for the PlayStation 3. The game is not that great, but the story is absolutely fascinating. You know, I love alternate history stories like this. And when I looked at the back of the case of this, and it said, from the writer of Red Dawn and Apocalypse Now, I've got both of them here. Here's one of them that I can show off. I have the original Red Dawn, and I have the remake to Red Dawn. It's a good story, and both of them deal with alternative history. But you know what else? A game that plays almost exactly like this, but is in much better shape graphically, and it doesn't crash as often. It's Call of Duty Ghosts. That's exactly what Homefront is. It's a Call of Duty clone. It plays exactly like Call of Duty. You have a 2-gun limit. Most of the guns on the floor you'll probably never really get to use, and most of them pretty much fire and do very much the same thing, because they can't give you too much of a variety because you're stuck with just 2 guns. That's my main gripe with the Call of Duty games, is that you're stuck with 2 guns. You don't really get to keep a weapon wheel. The weapon wheel is a lot of shooters like BioShock and Resistance 1 and 3. A lot of those games, and Red Faction 1 and 2, use weapon wheels, or something similar to that, like Doom Trilogy, Doom 3. They have weapon wheels that you could cycle through every weapon in the game. You get to keep them all, and that's fantastic. I love that. But this, I despise this type of 2-gun limit shooters. It's a dime a dozen. It's the Call of Duty formula. And mainly what people go to Call of Duty for, sadly, is not the campaign, which is why Ghosts failed. I'm in the minority. I know I am. I really am. I'm not a social gamer. I don't play multiplayer. I don't do multiplayer. I don't like Battle Royale. I don't like co-op. I don't like any of that stuff. I play games to escape people. You know, and so why would I want to bring people into the place where I want to escape people? You know, even if they're my friends, I want to hang out with them. It's just, I like to play games by myself. I don't do multiplayer. So, I didn't touch the multiplayer of Call of Duty, even though I've got Modern Warfare 1 through 3, Black Ops 1 and 2, Ghosts, Advanced Warfare, World at War, and I have now Homefront. And Homefront plays like any of the Call of Duties, maybe even the earliest ones. And even though this one came out around the time of, I think, Modern Warfare 3, which is a much better held and put together game. It really is. It's a better story. Yeah, but it doesn't crash as much. Homefront crashes a lot. And I do mean a lot. Maybe that's just my system, or who knows, I'm using a super slim. I didn't hear any loud fans. It didn't feel like the game was struggling. It just felt like once it tried to do an autosave, it froze. A lot of the time. So I would just have to shut the console off, turn it back on, get back into the autosave, and it turns out it did autosave, it just crashed. And I think it's just the game, because other games I play don't do this. So it has an interesting story, though. That's what kept me playing. That's what kept me going all the way to the end. Much like Red Dawn, almost exactly like Red Dawn, it's just a different country, foreign country invading, in an alternative history retelling. This takes place in the near future. It's 2025 right now, and in this, it's like 2028 or 2029-ish. I think even 2030 something. But the alternative history starts around 2011 with North Korea firing a missile, and during a missile test, and allegedly hits a South Korean vessel. And it's allegedly on accident, on purpose, who knows, but this does alternative history. So, forward warning, like with Red Dawn, whenever we talk about foreign countries doing all sorts of bad things in these stories, we're talking about alternative history. We're talking about alternative history. A way that history has happened is not saying that these countries have done this or they will do this. It's an alternative history retelling. It's fiction using alternative history. It requires you to be open-minded about these things and not actually get angry at any country that actually is doing this in the story, because they haven't actually. It's 2025 now. None of this has happened. None of it has happened except for the bird flu thing. Yeah. Homefront has there's a bunch of newspaper articles that you could pick up, little bonus side things for trophies and whatnot during the campaign. I'm going to tell you little sneak tidbits about what's been going on throughout the past decade and a half in Homefront's alternative history. And one of them is a bird flu epidemic. A bird flu epidemic happened roughly around the same time it's happening now. Odd. Oh well, anyways, you start in occupied Midwest Colorado as a pilot with military training. And you're freed by the freedom fighters, the resistance underground movement that engages in guerrilla warfare. And the big goal of this game is that you need to capture fuel tankers and drive those trucks to the west coast to the U.S. Army that is stationed there, so that they can launch a counterstrike on San Francisco to retake the city. And by retaking the city, they end up eventually domino affecting retaking the entire west coast. And then, with the east coast still in U.S. hands and the west coast still in U.S. hands, we can pincer attack and get the Midwest taken back as well. And then we probably take the fight back to the home country, maybe. Who knows? It just stops at San Francisco. And, by the time we finally took San Francisco back at the end of the game, I was all in. I was all in on the story. I was like, come on, let's go. We gotta retake the Midwest. We gotta get back. We gotta finish this campaign. This is just the start of the battle. It's just the start of the war. And the game ends, and nothing else happens. And the other sequel isn't really a sequel to Homefront. It's just an alternative side thing taking place somewhere else. It's an open world shooter type of thing, and it's not the same. It's not the same. So Homefront's just a standalone story that if you get interested in the story and you realize that they don't take it anywhere else, you're going to be very disappointed. That was me with Call of Duty Ghosts. It was. In Call of Duty Ghosts, there's another alternative history where a fictional nation rises up in South America / Central America. They become the new mega superpower, and they launch an attack on the U.S., decimating half of the U.S. And so you play as a U.S. Spec Ops guy, and you have to go in and launch an assault on the Central American fictional country that rises up there. And the story ends on a cliffhanger. We don't really get to take the fight to this fictional country. We don't get to take the fight to them and conquer them and retake our territory. We don't get to complete the story, much like in Call of Duty Ghosts. I wanted a Ghosts 2, but Ghosts didn't. It wasn't successful because these games are sold for the frickin' multiplayer. Even though the story was fantastic. Ghosts was a fantastic story. It really was. It was fantastic. I liked it more than Modern Warfare 1 through 3. I liked it more than Black Ops 2. I liked it more than World at War. It was one of the best stories. I was all in. But it didn't do well because its multiplayer was a dime a dozen. Because, ooh, look at the multiplayer. It's boring. It's just like Black Ops, and everybody still plays Black Ops 2 multiplayer instead. It's like, oh, come on. Can't you just play a campaign and be interested in a story that they're trying to tell instead of playing a board game that's a video game? But that's a rant for another time. It's a rant for another time. That's Homefront. There's nothing really much else I could say other than to say it's like Red Dawn, but it's a video game. So if you like the movie Red Dawn, you probably like the story of Homefront. You probably will. It's just that's just all it has. The game is Call of Duty, but bad. Call of Duty, but worse. It's the story that I found interesting. There's nothing else here. So if you hate the gameplay and you don't really care about Red Dawn, then you can leave this alone. But if you like Red Dawn and you want to see another alternative history story that's actually pretty interesting, but in a mediocre game, then go ahead and give Homefront a try.